Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alastair Ball.
And I'm Nick Devine.
And today we'll be discussing Marvel's superhero action extravaganza Captain America Civil War and the sixth series of HBO's epic fantasy Game of Thrones. We'll also be reviewing what we thought about the rest of Series 2 of Better Call Saul. We'll be discussing the casting of the new Doctor Who companion and finding out what Nick thought about David Lynch's creepy suburban thriller Blue Velvet. But first, Nick, what have you been watching this week?
Well, I got started on Season 4 of the BBC America clone sci-fi thing Orphan Black, which, to be honest, we both like it, so we probably would have been talking about it now if it hadn't been such a massive fortnight, but we'll probably get to it in a few weeks, I guess. But yeah, the first episode is the only one I've seen. It was pretty good. It was a big flashback to Season 1, which did briefly require me to try and pull my head together to remember exactly what was happening in Season 1. But yeah, it's promising. We'll see what it goes in the remaining 9 episodes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the first couple of series of that show, so I'm looking forward to the new series.
Cool, so what have you been watching?
This week I finally got around to seeing the last films in the Hunger Game franchise.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Mockingjay Part 2. And I hadn't read the books, so I didn't know how it ended. And that was some quite a few shocks and surprises at the end. Certainly wasn't expecting it to end the way they did. I'll shy away from spoilers in case the only other person in the world who doesn't know how the Hunger Games end is listening to this podcast.
But yeah, no, I thought it was really good, actually. I thought it was one of the better endings to a big franchisey thing I've seen lately. I mean, it probably didn't need to be 2 films, but I thought it was a decent ending.
The ending was perhaps a bit slow-paced, and it did drag, especially in the last 10-15 minutes, but I really thought they did justice to the whole story and they did wrap it up very well. And I really like the Hunger Games franchise. It's 4 really good films. The second one, Catching Fire, is probably my favourite. Thought that was really, really good.
I actually have a soft spot for the third one, even though it's phenomenally depressing. But yeah, it's a good franchise.
The third one is very good. It's got a great action sequence in the middle. It's really, really good.
Okay, and before we get into our pre-scheduled meat and potatoes of pop culture, the BBC dropped an announcement of the new Doctor Who companion, who will be a relatively new actress named Pearl Mackie, playing the character of Bill, who will be appearing with Peter Capaldi in Series 10, which will be Stephen Moffat's last series, and possibly also Capaldi's. It's all being left a bit vague. So yeah, it was a 2-minute tiny snippet of footage. Any strong opinions, Alastair?
Yeah, I thought she was good. I thought she was funny. She worked really well with Peter Capaldi, and that's the main thing, having good chemistry with the actor playing the Doctor, which they did have. I mean, I can't think of any companion that's not particularly had chemistry with the Doctor, but there's been some that have worked better and some that haven't worked as well. And I think, they've got a good, sort of back and forth. They can, they work well together. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they do over the course of, a whole series.
Yeah, they were sort of playing up the she's a normal person thing, which after last series where they did the whole Clara's basically becoming another Doctor is, I guess, a different angle. Even if I have seen, the obvious criticism that comes up whenever they cast a new companion is, another youngish contemporary female. Couldn't they have varied the demo a bit? But if they are wed to that format, I mean, I did wonder if Moffat would choose to do something really off the wall since it's his last series and he presumably isn't. All he has to do is finish something in 1 year. So I thought he might go for something a bit weirder.
I'd like them to get back to the idea of a companion being like a regular person, not some sort of significant cosmic being, as they have been in the past, or at least in the previous series. But I think this could be good. I mean, it's very difficult to judge really on a 2-minute clip, but it didn't disappoint. The only thing I found disappointing about it is the crushing realisation we have to wait till autumn 2017 to actually get a decent amount of new Doctor Who.
Well, yeah, there is the issue that that 2-minute clip might well be the only Doctor Who we get between Christmas and Christmas, which is a bit of a shame. But we get the Class spin-off, so hopefully that'll be good. Okay, our headline feature today is Captain America Civil War, the third film in the Captain America franchise and the 728th film in the Marvel Studios Avengers franchise. This features Chris Evans' Steve Rogers / Captain America going up against Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark / Iron Man in a battle over some combination of political ideology about collateral damage and what they should do with Steve's brainwashed assassin best buddy. So yep, this is probably the year's big Marvel film. Well, its only competition is Doctor Strange, so yeah, it's definitely the big Marvel film. It's probably one of the 2 big superhero films alongside Batman v Superman that we talked about a couple of episodes back. Yep, we have seen it. The Americans haven't. We'll try not to spoil the actual ending, but obviously we will be talking about the film for about 15-20 minutes, so the odds of us mentioning things like the direction of the story and the role of certain characters is probably inevitable. So if you are chronically spoiler-averse, then maybe save this till you've seen it. But yeah, okay, Alastair, what did you think?
Yeah, very good overall. Yeah, I must say it managed to be both quite funny and sort of quite emotional at different times, which is that really good balance that Marvel films get. Yeah, they have really great emotional stories. They've got these characters that everyone loves. We're very invested in them. But also, it managed to not take itself too seriously. There's a real sense of wit. Even when two characters we know really well are kind of beating away at each other. There's always there's wisecracks, there's funny bits, there's kind of back and forth. So it stops it becoming too gloomy and sort of firmly keeps it in the realm of fantasy. So you can feel like I'm kind of okay watching people kind of, fisticuffs between friends, because there's sort of a sense of humour woven throughout it. I was really impressed by how quickly the film could go from funny to serious. There were certainly several scenes when Tony Stark and Steve Rogers would be sort of arguing with each other, and there'd be some kind of quips back and forth, a few funny lines, and then the conversation would pivot dramatically and get serious and intense, and it didn't feel clunky. So I think they really did manage to walk that fine line by having a quite serious story, but also having a decent amount of laughs.
I guess they could have made the conflict seem a bit more real and deadly serious, but to be honest, by pressing on us how much all the characters can get on, it does give it some more weight when they start pounding on each other.
Yeah.
Obviously you had that bit in the middle of the fight where Black Widow and Hawkeye are we're still friends, yeah?
Yeah, which I liked.
Yeah, and obviously, the misunderstanding-based superhero team-up it's a bit of a standard story structure at this stage. I mean, from Batman v Superman to Arrow and Flash did it last year. It's been happening in comics probably about once a month for about 50 years at this point. So this was definitely one of the better versions of that, because taking at least some cues from the original Civil War comic, by giving both characters some kind of valid point, it doesn't seem quite as redundant and futile when they're just fighting for ages and ages.
No one was in the right, no one was in the wrong. You could see both people's point of view. I liked how the film focused on Steve Rogers' Captain America as its main character. I mean, this film has kind of been talked about, it's Avengers 3, it's another massive team up. And it is actually genuinely a Captain America film. He is the main character, and the majority of the drama is focused on the situation he's in, caught between two friends, Bucky and Iron Man. And it is very much about him. It is focused on him, even though there are a lot of characters in the film. It is based around that drama. Like you said, there's no correct answer, there's no right or wrong. Tony Stark and Steve Rogers fall out over the idea that basically these superheroes, enhanced, whatever you want to call them, should be regulated and controlled by the United Nations in some way in order to prevent the huge collateral damage caused by the big fight in New York at the end of Avengers Assembled and the big fight in Sokovia at the end of Avengers Age of Ultron. And you can see they both have valid points, and they both have, you can see where they're coming from, and that means that when they are first arguing and then fighting, it does give it a real sense of dramatic weight. You can tell that there's reasons behind it. And also because this is the third Captain America film and the 13th Marvel film, we know the characters well and we know where they're coming from.
Oh, not the 728th then, okay.
Well, you did add a few, but you're in the ballpark. Yeah, you get a sense of where the characters are coming from, and you know what they're like, and you know about their histories, which means that it's believable when they argue, and it's also believable they can argue to the point when they kind of start fighting each other. You know how loyal Steve Rogers is to Bucky, and so you know how focused and dedicated Iron Man is to the kind of exclusion of all else. So yeah, because we know these characters so well over the kind of preceding 12 films, it means that they can kind of move quite quickly with the plot and the story, and we can still follow it, and nothing seems kind of too sudden, too fast. It makes sense.
Yeah, I thought the Sokovia Accords were... part of me felt like that storyline got kind of abandoned in favour of the Bucky stuff. On the other hand, I guess you could argue that it was a sort of a way of introducing the debate and then using, obviously, Bucky as a material example of a dangerous superhuman who, in Iron Man's opinion, should be strongly regulated, and in Captain America's opinion, should be allowed to self-determine his own fate or whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously, Captain America's quite strongly biased towards not locking Bucky up or not doing lengthy experiments on him or whatever Iron Man and the UN would have suggested. In the Civil War comics, obviously, the entire principal argument was over the Superhuman Registration Act, whereas in this film, partly to justify it being a Captain America film, I guess, and partly to make it a bit more personal and stop it being a bit too waftily arguing about philosophy, they brought in Bucky. Yeah, which I think does work.
Yeah, I thought it was very good in that sense that it focused the drama of the story on this more human level. That, like I say, it broke it down above this kind of philosophical, political argument, above sort of the wider context of the fact there are loads of superheroes now in the world. It focused in on this central character drama between, Captain America caught between Bucky and Iron Man, caught between loyalty to one friend and loyalty to another friend.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. In terms of who I'd personally side with, Captain America seems like a nicer chap, but I suspect Iron Man might be right about superhero regulation.
There's not a clear resolution, so it gives the film pace and keeps it moving because there is this unresolved drama kind of at its core.
In terms of unresolved drama, part of me felt the ending was a bit, it's finished. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe that is something we should say for a hypothetical ending special. But although I did actually quite like the third act fight between Steve, Tony and Bucky, the actual final ending was a bit iffy for me. But anyway.
I like that the third act focused it in again. In the first act, they set up a lot of characters, the ones we're familiar with from previous Marvel films, sort of Black Widow, Scarlet Witch, Hawkeye, all these characters. And then in the second act, they add more characters. Spider-Man turns up, Ant-Man turns up. And then I like, in the third act, they do focus the drama in more closely on Iron Man, Captain America and Bucky, and they kind of bring it in to be focused in the end. And I think I've said before on the podcast, sometimes where these big superhero films go wrong is that in the final act they kind of expand the conflict outwards a lot and it kind of loses something in that. The perfect example is Avengers Assembled, when at the end of the film this aliens arrive and the conflict just grows exponentially, whereas kind of a lot of the great action films of the past like Die Hard, Predator, Alien, they kind of at the end they really focus in on the core conflict, and that's what this film did really well. At the end it shed all the extra stuff and really focused down to what the core of the conflict was, and I like that.
To give Avengers Assemble some credit, I think that little bit with Iron Man flying into the sky at the end was probably meant to be them trying to bring it down to a slightly more human level, but possibly it was...
Yeah, no, that was good.
A bit too little too late, maybe, I'm not sure. I don't have to worry about spoiling 8-year-old films, do I? But yeah, to briefly, but not too spoilerishly talk about more specific bits, I was quite a big fan of Spider-Man. I mean, I'm genuinely a big fan of Spider-Man. I think I've mentioned on the podcast before, but he is my favourite superhero, if I have such a thing. He's the one I've liked since I was 10. And yeah, there was a lot about this Spider-Man that was the most sort of comics accurate I've seen. Sort of the fact that he actually felt like a teenager, the fact that he was sort of neurotically quipping mid-fight, which is something they've really shied away from in the films to date. I don't know whether they felt it would be hard, because they perhaps usually go for a slightly more weighty, serious tone in the Spider-Man films than they have in this film. So they lightened it up a bit and they felt able to have him just jabbering during the fight and acting like a neurotic little teenager and hero worshipping Tony Stark, which I don't know, I imagine that might get old if it continues over the course of his entire solo film, but it was quite fun for his scene here.
Yeah, I thought Spider-Man was really good. I mean, I've not read any Spider-Man comics, although I do remember there was a Spider-Man animated TV show that I watched quite a lot of when I was I must have been around 10 years old. That had a wisecracking Spider-Man. He had a real sense of humour. And that is one thing I did feel that both the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films lacked. And that was that kind of, Spider-Man's wisecracks, his sense of humour. I thought they really did that well. And also it was great to what could have been in the big fight in the middle of the film, which is the big kind of, central Act 2 set piece, is when they get all the superheroes together to have kind of massive fight involving Spider-Man and all the others. It could have been a really weighty, oh, look at the tragedy of this, human misunderstandings lead to violence. But having Spider-Man sort of making wisecracks and stuff, and kind of Falcon being a bit kind of world weary about the whole thing, really brought that extra level of humour, which I thought really worked.
I could make pacing complaints about that. It's one of these that fight went on for absolutely ages. I think it almost certainly could have been shorter, but I don't know. I was pretty much enjoying it all the way through, so I would struggle to actually say cut that bit. I think possibly the bit where they fought for ages and then lined up and then ran in to fight again, I was a bit sort of, oh good lord, are we still fighting?
That kind of bit when they all lined up is a classic. Okay, this bit is only in the film so it can be in the trailer, because that kind of conveys the film in 10 seconds.
Yeah, and much as I loved the Spider-Man in this film, and again, I stress, I really did. Yeah, he is the one part of the film I think you could arguably have excised entirely without losing anything. He's just there to be there and, I guess, prepare us for his solo film next year.
He did really bring the humour, and I think the humour is important to this. But then so did Ant-Man. And I think you do have a valid criticism in that, and I do feel that there were a lot of characters, and had it been me, I would have cut some, certainly. And especially in the first act, there was a lot of introductions, and I felt it did really take a while to build up speed. They were even though we know these characters well, and they didn't, dwell on them for ages.
I don't know, I thought they did quite a good job of not lingering on the introductions to us. I didn't feel like we got an endless sequence of, hello, I'm Scarlet Witch, I do this. I thought it did just throw us in. Yeah, I didn't think it was slow to start, but there were a lot of characters, and by the sort of the middle, it did get a bit, my God, are you actually juggling all this? And then...
Yeah, it's quite interesting that they did introduce a lot of characters, mainly to build up a big Act 2 set piece rather than a big finale, which actually I thought worked really well. And that kind of, I think Spider-Man got a grand total of like kind of 2 scenes in the whole film. Again, Ant-Man, again, 2 scenes, got a few... 2-3 scenes, got a few wisecracks in. Vision again, a couple of scenes. But everyone got their kind of little moment. Like Scarlet Witch, who again probably only had 2-3 scenes in the whole film, still had a quite nicely contained story about how everyone's afraid of her, she doesn't like it, she feels kind of a bit lost and alienated. So she had like a kind of, it was about as much plot as a sort of subplot of a 20-minute TV show, but she had her little story arc and it worked quite well.
The Scarlet Witch probably got one of the biggest story arcs out of any of the background Avengers, to be honest. I mean, Hawkeye, Ant-Man and Spider-Man really did just turn up just to be meat for the fight. But outside of the sort of the Team Cap people like Falcon and Winter Soldier and Agent 13 and Bucky, who are basically there because it's a Captain America film, out of the guest Avengers, I thought Scarlet Witch probably got the best shake, to be honest.
Yeah, she did have a great plot, and it worked well. And what I liked about this film is it did have a lot of characters. Like I say, my personal thing is that it could have shaved a few to make it a bit better, but it was handled very well. But what I felt, they had a big fight sequence, and there were no red shirts. Basically, no one was just there to be another character in the fight to make it like a bit of a bigger scene. Every character you knew, and you knew why they were there. Even like a character like Ant-Man who just turned up, you knew like, okay, he's there because he knows Falcon from the Ant-Man film, and when they need more people, Falcon obviously called him up, and they don't need to go into this or explain it, you just know it. I can imagine that scene might have been very confusing to someone who hadn't really seen many of the other. If you hadn't seen many Marvel films, you might find that a bit confusing, but I like the fact that every character had a reason to be there, has a presence. There was no one who was just, fodder.
I think it was kind of a bit series finale. I think watching this would be like diving into a TV show in like the big final episode when they expect you to know who everyone is and know the stakes and not have to tell you what's going on, which, I mean, this felt like a better ending to Phase 2 than last year's films did, to be honest. This felt like, the logical conclusion of everything, but I guess you can't have 2 Captain America films in a phase or the world would collapse or something.
Yeah, although this is technically the first film in Phase 3, Ant-Man is the final film of Phase 2.
Well, yeah. Oh, maybe they're starting Phase 3 by ending Phase 2, or maybe I'm just talking complete horseshit, who can tell?
I guess the plot arc of Phase 3 is it begins with them being divided and will end with them being united in a forthcoming Avengers film.
I can't tell whether that's good or a shame, to be honest. They did do quite a good job of really messing up the Captain America, Iron Man, general into Avengers relationships, but you got to assume they're all going to just sort of decide to put their differences aside to save the planet because Thanos is going to turn up and try and destroy it later.
Yeah, and I think that could work really well.
At an exact pre-scheduled point in 2018.
Yeah. Can we take a moment to say that I really liked Black Panther? Another character brought in. I mean, for a film with a lot of characters, it also introduced quite a few characters like Spider-Man, as you mentioned. It's difficult to get a character in and have them have a real presence, and I think the Black Panther really did steal the show. Great character, really good action sequences, really well played by Chadwick Boseman. I'm really looking forward to the Black Panther film, which comes out in 2018, I believe. Again, I like that he had a self-contained story, and it was connected quite solidly to the main story in that he wanted revenge against Bucky. So again, there was like a kind of nice self-contained story that really worked, and it was related to the main conflict, so it didn't feel like just a kind of extra subplot. It really did feel part of the main plot.
The Black Panther plot did definitely feel more integrated than the Spider-Man plot, which, as I say, you could arguably just yank the Spider-Man plot out. The Black Panther plots, I mean, you could probably still have yanked it out, but you'd have left a lot more sort of dangling entrails.
Well, he also appears in the third act, which I thought is again and also he's to do with the resolution of, I guess, the film's main villain, as either Iron Man or Captain America are the villain. I don't know how much you want to say about that because it could be spoilery, but he's kind of woven throughout the course of the film. And he is an integral part of it, and which is, he really does steal the show, which is no small feat in a film that has, I don't know, like 9 or 10 major superheroes, some of which we've seen 5 or 6 films about, such as Iron Man.
I don't know if I'd give him full show-stealing points, but, they clearly made a big effort to sell him, and Chadwick Boseman was clearly up to it. But yeah, the villain, I mean, we probably don't want to talk extensively about exactly who he is and what he's done, but the villain, I guess, kind of inevitably felt a bit low stakes. I felt like they kind of committed to a slightly less splashy, memorable villain in this film, because the main draw of the film was the inter-hero fights rather than them facing off against the villain.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right about that. The idea, and also, the villain wasn't an enhanced person or a superhero. He was a human being trying to manipulate circumstances. So, and I think trying to put in a super villain, it would have just been a bit too much for this film and to make it believable. I like the fact that, they had a kind of human storyline running through it. And that storyline is related to some of the themes that the film brings out. I did feel there were moments when the plot line, kind of the villain plot line did lose me a bit. There were some times when I was sitting there thinking, where's this going? It's kind of slowing the film down a bit. It's already quite a long film. But, it did work in the end. But I did feel kind of, we've got enough drama in this film with the Sokovia Accords and with the relationship between Iron Man, Bucky, and Captain America. Why is there this extra level of conflict? I mean, I felt it worked to the end, but I felt it could have been done better.
I don't know, considering how many balls were in the air and considering how much they were trying to do, I thought it was amazing how coherent it felt, to be honest. I thought, I don't know, I've said this in previous podcasts, there's an element of goodwill in terms of, how much give you're willing to let a film have for sort of overstuffing it with other characters or blatantly doing setup for future films. And this film was sufficiently entertaining and good-natured that I didn't mind the somewhat superfluous Spider-Man plot, or the fact that it was clearly trying to do about 17 things at once. Partly because none of them felt as much like complete tangents as, say, some of the stuff during Age of Ultron did. I mean, I haven't entirely decided where this sits on my internal league table of Marvel films, but I'm pretty certain it's above Age of Ultron.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. Age of Ultron felt it was like overloaded with extra characters, and with all their stories kind of crammed in, and it had a bit too much. Like, we have a break for 20 minutes to play house with Hawkeye, and I'm just like, what is the point in this? But, this film didn't have any of that. It was much more tighter. And as you said, what made it work is that it all came down to basically the relationship between the 3 core characters, Bucky, Iron Man, Captain America. It was really focused on that. The rest was kind of orbiting around that, so it was important, but it was all held together by the central gravity of this character conflict. And, that's what made the film really work.
Yeah, I mean, everything outside that central three-way, I'm sure that fan fiction exists, did inevitably end up getting a bit underserved. And like I said, the villain plot, his romance subplot with Agent 13, that was also there.
I guess that was kind of continuing on from the previous film.
It was a nice continuance, and I do like Emily Van Camp, so I kind of wish they give her a bit more to do. But, yeah, I mean, and to be fair, it didn't feel like they thought that was more than it was. At no point in the film did Captain America pull through a fight motivated entirely by his love for Agent 13. There was a mutual attraction which was briefly acknowledged, and that was about it. So, fair enough. It felt like the audience and the filmmakers were on board as to how much this matters, so that's fine.
Yeah.
So again, goodwill, audience engagement. I think they has it.
They built up that currency with 12 films, which are pretty good. There are some really, really good ones. There's only a few that really stink. And, they built up that degree of goodwill. But also they built up with, so many films that are very, character-focused. I mean, we had, 3 films entirely focused, really, on Tony Stark and Iron Man and going into him. So we felt we really know him well.
So, yeah, I did want to overload the Batman v Superman comparisons because we talked about that quite a lot 2 episodes ago, and also it's lame to spend ages positively reviewing something by endlessly slagging off something else.
Yeah, I've deliberately tried to avoid comparing it to Batman v Superman so far.
I mean, yeah, obviously we preferred it. Obviously, it did a lot of the same things, like collateral damage and hero-on-hero fighting better. It had a lot more goodwill by being, funny and good-natured and like it was actually wanted us to enjoy it. But yeah, so I was curious, during that review you said that your dislike of that film had started to make you wonder about superhero team-ups as a whole. Has this changed your mind at all? Or?
Actually, yeah, I would say to a degree this has changed my mind. I do think that this film definitely worked, whereas Batman v Superman didn't, and Age of Ultron had a lot of flaws. This film, I think, really did work. Mainly, as I've said, it's because at its core it had basically the kind of focus on 2 to 3 characters, which, most films need kind of that degree of discipline at their core story. This film really worked as a superhero team-up because a lot of the people were kind of orbiting around it, just getting a couple of scenes. So in that sense, and, to make it a better film, some of those people certainly could have been lost. So less teaming up would have made it maybe a better film. I'm prepared to admit that this film I was wrong. This film does work as a superhero team-up. And if they can, use this kind of template for, say, the Avengers Infinity Wars, then it'll be a good film. My concern is that when they get to an Avengers film, they're going to go, every Avenger is the main character, therefore they must all have a plot line that is of equal weight, which is pretty much what happened in Age of Ultron, and it meant there were just too many plot lines. Batman vs Superman kind of had a slightly different problem, which is in that it kind of mainly did focus on Batman and Superman, and Lex Luthor and all the other characters didn't seem to have a point at all. I mean, there was a point in Spider-Man being in Civil War, there was a point in Black Panther being there was a point in Hawkeye being there was a point in Ant-Man being there. I still do have no idea what really the point of having Lois Lane in Batman v Superman was, other than the fact that it's got Superman in it. It must have Lois Lane in it. It was a slightly different problem.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that like Spider-Man in this is similar to Wonder Woman's role in Batman v Superman, in that he gets like a brief intro scene and then he just turns up and fights a bit.
Yeah.
But I think it's just done with a bit more character. And
also, Batman vs Superman has the problem that at the end the conflict goes outwards and expands, rather than like focusing in. I don't want to get too spoilery for Batman v Superman, although probably at this point everyone who wants to see it has seen it or has just been thoroughly put off by our terrible review of it.
I think we spoiled it repeatedly in the last podcast we did about it, to be honest.
Yeah, because they get to what should have been the core drama of the film, which is Batman fighting Superman, and it lasts for not very long before they throw in a giant CGI Doomsday who's barely been set up, just as a kind of giant thing for them to punch, and and then it becomes this giant conflict that involves flying into outer space and hopping between Metropolis and Gotham. It's just it's just too big and too much for the end of a film that needs to focus in on its core drama in the final moments, and that's what Captain America Civil War does well.
Yeah, a good film, and they've got the same filmmakers back for Infinity War, so I mean I'm curious how they'll do with something which is perhaps more cosmic Avengers fights rather than people kicking each other in stairwells, which seems to be the trademark style of this and Winter Soldier. Lots of sort of building based fighting, but then again they did handle that big airport scene quite well, and that was that was a good scene, a bit of an upscale superhero thing. So yeah, I 2 years, so probably shouldn't get too excited yet, but I'm up for it.
Next up, we are discussing the first episode of Series 6 of Game of Thrones. Series 5 ended with quite a few cliffhangers. We weren't really sure which of the characters were alive or dead, and we had to wait a whole year to find out, which is why I was pretty excited this evening when I finally got to watch the new episode, and I was impressed with it so far. Again, it's the beginning of the series. They set a few plot lines in motion. Not really sure where they're going to go, so it's hard to be too critical at this point.
Yeah, it did very much go straight back into it, which was nice. I mean, with the series premieres of Game of Thrones, they always do a bit of this sort of, here's a gentle catch-up, here's where everyone is, show you what's going on with them, a bit of a reminder, and then we'll just sort of nudge them gently towards their plot for this year.
Yeah, the first episode and the last episode of each series tends to have one scene from each of the characters. Because there are quite a lot of characters to get through. The intervening sort of 8 episodes will usually focus in primarily on like 2 or 3 of the characters and sort of progress their stories significantly. And then that you might not see that character for a week, or they might play a minor role next week. So it'll be interesting to see next week when we get some proper meaty plot chunks for one of the characters or 2 of the characters.
Meaty plot chunks, eh? Yeah, the format was this sort of montage of like everyone except for the wall bits. They only went to everyone once and just gave them like 5 minutes or so and then moved on to the next person. So yeah, the events didn't feel as much like a story, but I guess, to be honest, I had gone back and read the Wikipedia page to remind myself where everyone was, but I didn't mind the catch-up. It did take me a few seconds to get back into every story, and I do now feel quite invested again, so fair enough.
Yeah, I think it felt like about 8 or so beginnings. Some of the plot lines clearly were, the beginning of something, big that's going to, cover the course of the next series. The Daenerys plot line, obvious example of that. She's met a whole bunch of new characters.
Yeah, I was entertained to see that the Daenerys plotline was the comic relief this time, which is unusual. The sort of world-weary Dothraki banter.
That was good. It was great to see Tyrion again wandering around, sort of making witty comments and sort of pointing at things.
Tyrion's bit was a bit sort of Captain Exposition to me. It was a bit sort of wandering around, just talking about with Varys about the state of everything in a very just sort of let's catch the audience up way. But it wasn't very long, then I'm assuming a story will start at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure that the plot line here will continue. I think his plot line this series is going to be to do with the Lord of the Light, because that other religion, this kind of new religion that's rising in Westeros, which the Red Woman follows.
Yeah, the ones who brought that bloke back from the dead in season 3, and let's face it, I'm probably going to somehow be involved in bringing Jon Snow back from the dead.
I think that's quite likely.
I mean, the parts that had the biggest plot advancement, well, among the biggest plot advancement, was the Dawn bit and the Sansa bit. Dawn had like a sudden coup, and Sansa bit had her finally meeting up with Brienne and actually, teaming up with her. And because I was vaguely following the internet dialogue around the show last season, so I was curious whether there was parts of that which were actual reactions to the comments around last season. Like, the Dawn bit last season was wildly criticised for being the worst bit, basically. Jaime and Bronn go on a long rambling holiday and look at some stabby people and then get locked in a prison, and then one of them gets their tits out for no discernible reason.
That was basically it.
That was amazing storytelling, bravo. And so I don't know whether the sort of cutting to the chase and going straight to the bloody betrayals, establishing the Dornish lady as a major villain, is their way of cutting that storyline into something more exciting.
I think they're certainly building up towards a big war between the Lannisters and Dorne, or between King's Landing and Dorne. I think that seems to be one of the major plot threads. Yeah,
and elsewhere in the Sansa storyline, they got a lot of criticism last year for Sansa's ongoing perpetual victimhood. She just sort of, with the exception of a few tiny victories, she's basically just been suffering continuously since the start of the show, basically.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether there was that little bit where it looked like she was going to be immediately recaptured by Ramsay, which I sort of took as a little bit of an audience troll, to be honest. A bit of, haha, are we going to do exactly what you expect us to do? And then they brought Brienne in to save the day.
Yeah, I liked that bit a lot. I thought it was good. It was nice to have something positive happen, especially to Sansa, now that she's free of Ramsay Bolton and his quite disgusting tastes.
Can't get much worse, really, can it? Yeah, I enjoyed the bit, even though he was mostly having actually a quite subdued, sad moment in his one scene. He still managed to talk about feeding his ex-girlfriend to the hounds. So yeah, he's
quite reliably nasty.
And I enjoyed him having a sort of regular, despicable villain. Even if he isn't sort of theatrically despicable like Joffrey was, he's just unpleasant.
Yeah, I think so. It's nice that they've kept, that kind of element of medieval cruelty running through the show. The Boltons can always be relied on to do something awful, because their banner is a flayed man, so there's usually something nasty involving flesh and torture. But
during the bit where Sansa was accepting Brienne's Pledge of Allegiance, that was possibly my biggest moment of emotion in the whole episode, actually. I really felt, that did do a lot to get me back invested into the stories.
And there was, Arya is, being blind and begging, whilst also being sort of picked on by that other person from the assassin's house.
I think she's going to become Daredevil.
Probably. That's probably where it's going. She's my favourite character, though, and I do like her plotline the most. And I've been sitting quite patiently for a couple of series, after she was, at the end of Series 2, offered the chance to become a shape-shifting assassin. For some reason, turned it down. I don't know why anyone would ever turn down the opportunity to become a shape-shifting assassin.
Maybe she loves her family or something. She seemed quite keen to find them. I mean, she fucked it up, but, she tried.
I guess there's always love.
I'm not as big a fan of Arya's storyline, to be honest. It was sort of cool last series, but as we enter our second season of her wearing rags on the streets of Bravos, I'm beginning to get a bit, something's going to happen soon, isn't it?
I would like the plotline to move forward substantially. The thing is with the faceless men, or I guess faceless woman in Arya's case, but the thing about the sort of shape-shifting assassins is they are by their nature very mysterious. And I think the writers have kind of sort of got themselves into a corner a bit, which is now that Arya's probing the mystery, they're going to have to kind of peel back the layers of mystery that surround these characters and give us some sort of evidence or something substantial behind it. And so far what they provide us with is more mystery, which is, okay, that's interesting, that's kept us intrigued, that's kept that going. But sooner or later they're going to have to get to a point of explaining a few things about these people. How magical are they, what they are, what their sort of purpose is, what they do.
I will be a bit disappointed, I think, if the Arya storyline hasn't, found the rest of the plot by the end of the season. I'll go that far. Yeah, for the most part, it was an effective catch-up, and there's always, the fun guessing game we now get to play about how faithful this will be to the forthcoming 6th novel.
Yeah, which is interesting, because we have no idea when that's going to come out. I mean, there might be another 2 or even 3 series of Game of Thrones before that comes out.
Yeah, there's been dialogue in, the geek press about, the fact that it seems like HBO, the channel, want the show to go on a fair bit longer than the showrunners perhaps do. They probably want to wrap it up in the next couple of seasons, like Series 7 or 8 or so, and I think HBO would like it to go a bit longer.
Yeah, I guess they don't want to stop something that's so successful.
HBO are normally one of the few TV channels who can be relied on to actually let these things die, most of their big shows like The Wire and 6 Feet Under, they ended at a good time.
And the thing about Game of Thrones is people really invested in this epic storyline. But if they get to the point, if the audience feels that the storyline's not moving forward, and that they're purposely slowing it down, making it, not advance just to prolong it, then people will lose interest and they will disappear.
Yeah, I think they've still got it. I mean, there was a rumour that, like, series 7 and 8 will be, like, truncated, and there'll be, like, 13 episodes between them, and then that'll be the end. And, I don't know, I'll be sad to see it go, but I will also, I think it has reached a point where I'm quite liking the fact that they're starting to thin out the cast a bit, like, they killed off a few of them. They're starting to maybe move it gently towards a conclusion.
Yeah, I'd like to see it move towards a conclusion, certainly, and I'd like to get a sense that there is a definite goal in mind and a timetable to reach it, so that this isn't going to keep moving on and on and on. I mean, some shows, there have been shows I really, really liked in the past that I have gone off when I realised they are not moving, they're kind of hinting at a vague conclusion that they're never ever going to get to, they're never going to move towards. As eternally obstacles in the way, slowing the characters down from reaching the inevitable end point just so they can prolong it, and there's nothing more really off-putting than that.
Yeah, I mean, allegedly, I don't know, anecdotally I guess, George R. R. Martin has told them the ending, although whether he's told them every detail about how he's going to get there, I don't know. I assume they've got at least a broad roadmap, but I wouldn't be surprised if they diverge a bit, if only because, inevitably the story's going to appear on TV before it appears in the books. So he'll have, if George R. R. Martin changes his mind or watches the TV version and thinks, actually no, I've got a better idea now that I've seen that.
Yeah, and obviously there are characters that aren't in the TV show that are in the book.
There are certainly some that are dead in one and not in the other, yeah.
Yeah, obviously there's the books are very big and they've introduced a lot of characters. There's a lot of minor Greyjoys that crop up and things like that which aren't in the TV show. Probably for the best, because the TV show does have enough characters as it is.
Yeah, I do keep wondering if the Greyjoys are going to pop up again. It's been a while. Quite impressed they managed to get most of their catch up into one episode. Normally it takes them 2 episodes to get round everybody, to be honest.
Well, we didn't see Bran, and he's supposed to be in this series.
Oh god, I forgot about him. I wonder how far through puberty he's got now.
Yeah, well, he was left at the end of the last series somewhere up in the frozen north with the Three-Eyed Raven, and he wasn't in the in series 5 at all. So
I've seen it mentioned he's going to be in it. I think I've seen the actor doing some publicity and stuff. So yeah, he should be appearing at some stage.
The biggest question will be over, what happens to Jon Snow.
Yeah, I'm assuming Jon will be back by about the middle of the season, and I don't know how. I mean, if they think there's drama to be wrung from him being dead and how he comes back, I guess. I suppose he could come back as a White Walker and turn out to be a baddie. That would be a depressing twist, but I don't know if I'll go quite that far.
It's difficult to say. It is a show that's known for going in unexpected directions, especially unexpected and dark directions.
It's true, but he's one of the only, him and the 2 Stark sisters and Brienne are the only straightforward, sympathetic characters left.
But he's the most straightforward, heroic figure in that he wants to do the right thing and is generally a decent guy trying to go about it the right way.
So Thrones tradition dictates he gets bones then, yeah, you're right.
I don't know, being betrayed by all his brothers in the Night Watch, that may influence your opinion of the world. So, Jon Snow might have finally learned something.
Yeah, I'm game. I am sure we'll revisit this in a few episodes' time. Maybe at the midway point, maybe at the end. See where it's all going.
I'm certainly intrigued. And like you said, I'm invested again after one episode and looking forward to seeing more. I do always enjoy the first episode of a series of Game of Thrones because you get that brilliant feeling of, oh yeah, that was great, and there's 9 to come. So lots of big meaty chunks of story.
Anything could happen. At least one major character surely has to die.
I think it'd be disappointing if one doesn't.
Okay, next this week, the 2nd season of Better Call Saul, the Breaking Bad prequel show, came to an end in the last couple of weeks. Lots of establishing of the relationship between the McGill brothers, a bit of build-up of Mike's criminal connections, and a few more Breaking Bad cameos. In fact, in some places, a really massive accelerated amount of Breaking Bad cameos, but always in quite understated ways. So yeah, we did discuss our broad feelings about the show and the nature of prequels and stuff back in episode 2, but just briefly, now that the season is finished, Alastair, what did you think of it?
Well, I really liked it. I mean, I liked it a lot, as I said in episode 2, and having only seen a few episodes. And the series didn't disappoint. It's got real drama, it's got great characters. What I really liked about it is it's not the most tense kind of action-packed twist and turn, TV show. It's clearly not trying to be, do what Breaking Bad does, or even like, Game of Thrones does with, action and violence in basically every single episode. It's quite slow-paced. It's more about the characters, their relationships. Things, evolve quite slowly. You get a real rich sense of the characters, I think. By the end of Series 2, I learned so much about, the relationship between Saul, or Jimmy McGill as he is, at this point, and his brother Chuck. Really got a sense of who they are. And, you know, found out a lot more about Mike and his life and what he's trying to do.
Yeah, it was beautifully made. There was lots of, you know, all the lovely camera angles, all the naturalistic dialogue, the occasional sort of elaborate musical montage. There was a montage like 3 episodes before the end, the big inflatables montage when he's just, well, twatting around in his office, basically, which was brilliant.
That was very funny, yeah.
There's been, I don't know, again, me reading the sort of the internet dialogue around Better Call Saul and talking to some of my friends who are watching it. There does seem to be the beginning of a slight backlash against it for being very, very slow.
That is my only criticism, which is that it is quite slow-paced. And I like the fact that it's slow-paced and it's not as fast-paced as Breaking Bad. And it's quite different to a lot of stuff that's on TV, that it is slower-paced, which is refreshingly different. You know, this, you know, focusing on character, not driving narrative. However, I am at this point beginning to think some moving along would be good. Like, for example, 2 series is enough to cover the plot line of Saul and his sort of rivalry with his brother. I was kind of hoping that would be wrapped up at this point, and, you know, he'd moved on to be a bit more like the character we see in Breaking Bad. I mean, he hasn't even got to the point yet of taking the name Saul as his business name. He's still Jimmy McGill. So I think it's good, but I definitely think it's a valid criticism that it is moving quite slowly, and, you know, maybe a bit more muster would help. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I think it is scene to scene really beautifully made, but it is sometimes sometimes sit back at the end of the episode and go, not much actually happens. But then again, it is always quite good at paying off the drama from moment to moment. You know, stuff that happens in an episode does usually come back to bite him by the end of that episode or by the next one.
Yeah, and they always make sure to end the episode on a cliffhanger or on something interesting or tense, so you never left feeling particularly disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, there is a solid sense of at least one substantial event in every episode, but, I don't know, only having one event in an episode is actually quite a slow pace for a lot of the TV shows. I mean, they did seem to really commit this year to a full exploration of the Kim character. In the first season, she was possibly a bit of a one-dimensional love interest at times.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, they definitely, a lot more development of her, and you really got a sense of her as a person. And I think, yeah, definitely managed to create fully rounded, 3-dimensional character.
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately she is the only real developed female presence on this otherwise quite male show, so it is probably good that they're actually making an effort to give her a presence and a non-simplistic personality, rather than risking her becoming this sort of party-pooping girlfriend like Skylar kind of did at Breaking Bad at times.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point. I think also the Mike storyline is progressing quite slowly as well. You know, I'm interested to see how Mike becomes the character he is when we first meet him in Breaking Bad. But he still hasn't progressed a lot beyond the situation he was in at the beginning of Series 1. I mean, he's kind of rubbed up against the cartel a bit, but he hasn't really done a lot. I mean, but the series finale had a very, very tense Mike scene. Really, really good, substantial scene that I really liked. And I was really kind of like one of those things when you're like properly tensed when you're watching it, really invested in the character, really invested in the drama. Great television. And then that scene ends and there's not much sense of a resolution. There's not much solid action. There's not really anything going forward. The situation isn't resolved. So I kind of felt that wasn't great writing, but it just needed that little bit more to be truly brilliant.
I don't know. There was the hint of the sort of off-screen presence. I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm lingering hard into spoiler territory here. Feels like they're hinting at this higher character, and I think, to be honest, it seems fairly obvious who it's going to end up being.
Yeah. I think it would have been better if they showed him or had a bit more of a confrontation at the end of Series 2 just to give it that kind of extra substance that you need from a series finale. Something big, you know. I really liked Mike's story. I just wanted that bit more of resolution, a bit more progression. It's just the criticism I keep coming back to Better Call Saul, which is that it, you know, is really well done. As you said, it's beautifully shot, it's beautifully written, it's great characterization, it's great detail. It's just maybe just a little bit more drama. Just a little bit more.
See, I was mostly okay with the level of drama in Mike's storyline. I really liked the sequence at the very start of one of the last few episodes when he robbed that truck. I thought that was, again, amazingly executed.
Yeah, that was really good.
If they just had a slightly bigger bang at the end of his scenes in the finale, I think, honestly, I would have pretty much scored that off as a great plotline. I thought that did a good job of taking Mike from this sort of slightly legally iffy cop into someone who's properly involved with the gangs, which I guess it still has. I just felt like it sort of trailed off rather than having a real big move forward.
Yeah, I think they needed to cross the line in this series of Mike becoming basically kind of a full-time professional criminal, where he's still kind of teetering on the edge of being a respectable civilian.
The point that the McGill brothers story reached was a really good cliffhanger. The point the Mike story reached was a really good cliffhanger. There's a part of me which would have been happier if that had been the penultimate episode of the series, and then we got another episode actually exploring the fallout of those cliffhangers.
Yes, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. That would have probably been a bit better, yeah. I mean, the cliffhanger right at the end of the series, is a great cliffhanger. I was really kind of taken aback and really like, wow, that's great. I really want to see where this goes. But I kind of felt, like you say, it had it had the sort of strength of an absolutely brilliant, kind of episode 9 cliffhanger. Whereas I'd have then liked to have an episode 10 resolving the plot lines from series 2 so that series 3 can create new plot lines.
Yeah, I feel like I'm kicking a really well-groomed puppy because it's a great show in most measurable ways. I just hard not to feel at least mildly frustrated by how far it's actually moved. But on the other hand, while I'm watching it, I'm always quite immersed. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just one of these shows that's better off binged on DVD, I don't know.
Maybe. It's a great show, and I can say a lot of positive things about it. I just don't want to see, I can only say positive things about that show. In terms of what you said about, is it better binged on DVD, I actually think the way it's presented, which is a week-by-week release on Netflix, is a great way to watch the show, because over the course of the 10 episodes, as we've said, there isn't an enormous amount of character or narrative progression. I think that if you binged it on DVD, then the episodes would kind of blend into one a lot more, as there is, because they don't have that kind of regular progression. Whereas watching one episode a week as it came on Netflix, I really appreciated how well written each self-contained episode was, how well plotted it was, how they each drove moved the plot and characters forwards.
Yeah, possibly. It does seem like next season they've pretty much got no choice but to go fairly quickly into the aftermath of the 2 events in the finale, and hopefully that'll be quite exciting.
Yeah, there'll certainly be some good drama in the next series. And definitely by series 3, seeing the way they position it, in series 3 they're definitely going to have to move into the characters in their criminal lives, because that's really the only direction they can take it in at this point.
And surely we have to see the secret origin of how Hector ended up a little bell-ringing man in a wheelchair.
Yeah, well, he's had a stroke, I always got, but, at some point he's going to have a stroke.
Well, surely, since they've bothered to bring him back and stuff, they're going to have him have the stroke at the most advantageous or disadvantageous possible time.
There was quite a lot of Breaking Bad cameos, series 2. I guess Hector being the big guy. Well, they had Tuco in series 1, and Tuco's back in this series.
I did actually look this up on one of the wikis, and there was quite a lot of small cameos if you knew where to look for them. Apparently the arms dealer who sold Mike his weapons was from Breaking Bad. There was the twins, of course. The dealer who Tuco was talking to in the diner was Crazy 8 from season 1 of Breaking Bad, the guy who met a slightly sticky end in Walt's basement. Oh, right. I did not know that. See, that's a great cameo. I mean, I remember the character, but I just didn't put 2 and 2 together, and that was him. I wouldn't have got it either. I looked it up because I saw people starting to talk about the number of cameos, and I got curious exactly what they all were. And yeah, it turns out they were bloody everywhere. And the Doctor... I recognise the Doctor because she's at the beginning of series 1, isn't she? Better Call Saul is when... the first time Chuck was admitted to hospital. Yeah, the first time he's taken ill, she appears. She's a very familiar actress. She's a well-known actress. Clea Duvall, yeah. She's been in a few things. I remember first seeing her when she was playing the Invisible Girl in one of the early episodes of Buffy. Yeah, she was definitely in the first series. She was Chuck's doctor in the first series. The one who's concerned about Chuck's sort of slightly unusual medical condition. And I like how they keep it sort of ambiguous, that we're not sure if it's psychological or if it's an actual medical condition that he has. But yeah, no, it was a good season. And, I mean, I don't know, ultimately the writers of Better Call Saul are clearly pretty big and powerful in the industry at this point. They had their big success, so if they want to do their sort of slightly indulgent craft-based drama, then I guess we can't stop them. It's good, and there's not much on TV that's like this. I don't pretend I've surveyed all of the shows that are on TV and stuff. There's nothing, that I've heard people discuss or seen bits of that, or or anything that I follow regularly that really has the sense of like this kind of detailed characterization that all of the conflict pretty much comes from interpersonal conflict and people's personal conflict. It's very character based. It's very low key. Yeah, no, it's good. It's a good show. I like it. I will be, as I say, we're back here in sort of episode 28 or 30 or something to see how season 3 went. Last time I recommended to Nick David Lynch's dark thriller Blue Velvet,
about a teenage boy who investigates the case of a severed ear he finds and is then sucked into a criminal underworld that lurks beneath the surface of a idyllic American town. So, Nick, what did you think of this film?
It's very 80s. Yeah, I enjoy a bit of weird below the normal. It was, again, much like Better Call Saul, I guess. All the shots were very nice, all the acting was very good. A bit slow to start, but I really enjoyed it once Frank turned up. Yeah, he really made it for me. He really gave it some energy.
Yeah, Dennis Hopper he's one of my favourite actors. An amazing talent, sadly missed as he passed away a couple of years ago. But he's brilliant in this film. And as soon as he shows up, he just kind of, takes over the film and takes over the screen. And he's absolutely terrifying in the way he just kind of, these sort of sudden explosions of rage and this intensity. Frank is a brilliant character.
It's the way that, as you say, the sudden explosions of rage. And once it's happened a couple of times, he always manages to get across that it could happen at any moment. And therefore, wherever he's on screen, you're just sort of, no matter how nice he's being or what he's saying or what he's doing or how well things seem to be going, you're just watching him for this sudden freak out.
Yeah. And he wears this weird mask and is sort of sucking up some strange gas that you never really find out what that's about, which seems to make him even more insane.
Yeah, he's huffing some sort of massive industrial solvent, I don't really know. But yeah, he was... Yeah. Part of me feels weird saying I liked him best because he was clearly a bit fucked up. The slightly weird rapey scene when he first appeared was... as creepy as it was intended to be, I'm sure.
Rewatching this film, I hadn't seen it in a few years, and I'm more aware of the need to be sensitive around issues of rape and sexual assault. I'd certainly say, actually, to anyone who is thinking of watching Blue Velvet, it is a great film. It does have a trigger warning, certainly for domestic and sexual violence. If you're, you should be aware of that if you're going to watch this film. But watching it again, I did realise there is sexual violence in it. I thought it worked with the story, and it wasn't gratuitous, but integral to the story. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that, Nick.
I thought it was clearly an integral part of Frank and of Dorothy's story. I don't know how well the teenager Jeffrey really comes across, sort of coming out of this woman's closet after she's just been raped. I mean, I guess he doesn't, immediately try and take advantage of her or anything, and it is always portrayed as a slightly weird, unhealthy relationship. Yeah,
because she's a victim of abuse, and is therefore kind of the previous abuse is colouring her relationships and her emotions.
Yeah, the way he was sort of involved with both of these women at once is one of these things where you watch the film, and the film very nicely doesn't, spoon feed you the ethical dilemma of it. It just sort of, it's happening and you're sort of thinking, am I meant to think this is a bit weird? Or is this a part of the weirdness that's acceptable because this is quite a weird film? And yeah, in the climactic scene where he goes on a date with the Sandy character played by Laura Dern, it sort of explodes out and they have to deal with all three of them at once, and it becomes clear that no, the actual recognisable human emotion is there. It's not all operating in this ridiculous, over-the-top artifice thing. I think it did work in the end. It's definitely something that would be triggering if that's something that you find upsetting. But as a sort of weird adult thriller, I don't think it felt gratuitous.
The main theme of the film is that underneath the kind of supposedly perfect all-American exterior, there lurks this dark, kind of violent world underneath. And you see that's kind of brought out very early on in the film. Like, it starts with these kind of long shots of, something of, very idealized suburban America with kind of, white picket fence and people watering their lawns and kind of everyone's like sort of smiling and it's always sunny and, the gardens are all in bloom. And then it kind of zooms in and behind all the beautiful plants, you see there's just like loads of like bugs kind of digging through dirt and being quite disgusting. And that kind of sums up the film. And I think the fact that Frank, the kind of criminal underworld gangster type character, he's the sort of thing that lurks beneath this idealized surface, and these sort of rape and abuse elements of the plot, I think it kind of works with the themes the film's exploring, because abuse and violence in that sense are kind of kept secret and hidden away, and people are capable of projecting this very, I'm sort of very perfect, I'm very normal exterior, but underneath there's problems, there's violence, and I think so that works. That's why I think it works, because it works with the theme of the film, and it kind of works with the issue they're exploring, or how something looks perfect on the surface, but if you scratch the surface, there's something really nasty going on underneath, and I think that is a kind of a dynamic of abusive relationships.
Yeah, I mean, after the whole nearly 2 hours of them really getting into the idea of the horrible truth about everything, I was surprised how, I guess I'm about to drop a mild spoiler for a film that's the best part of 30 years old, but it seemed like a weirdly conventional happy ending in the end. I mean, I guess...
I interpreted that as irony. The idea that, the sort of supposedly perfect world is restored at the end. Like, everything that's bad is undone. Even, like, the film opens with the first nasty thing that happens is his father has a stroke, the main character, played by Carl McLachlan, who you'll recognise from Twin Peaks. This was, I think, the first time he worked with David Lynch, was Blue Velvet.
Yeah, true. I also recognise him from season 2 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
And he played Paul Atreides in that terrible Dune film that David Lynch made a few years later. But yeah, even like the kind of his father's stroke is, undone by the end, almost by magic. And I got the sense that the fact that they've got into the darkness and then they've come out and now everything's happy and he's like ridiculously happy. It's so beautiful and bright at the end, and everyone's all together and everyone's really happy and everything's perfect. Is this kind of sense of the darkness hasn't gone away. Frank may not be an issue anymore, but the darkness underneath the perfect exterior is still there. They haven't solved America's drug problem or anything like that. They haven't got rid of crime, but everyone's just gone back to believing that everything can be perfect and everything's happy in this kind of very fictional conceit that films have, which is they get to the end and then they're always like, oh yeah, and everything's fine now, and clearly everything's not fine. So I assume that kind of the exaggerated sort of idealized ending was an ironic statement.
So it's basically a sarcastic happy ending.
Yeah, I'd put it that way.
Everything's fine. We've defeated the villain. He's gone away. What else could possibly be the problem? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when you watch large amounts of films where the couple get together at the end off the back of some big intense experience, and you think, well, that's clearly not going to last 5 minutes, but okay, the film ending seems to make me want to think it will.
Yeah, exactly. You can't exactly imagine Han and Leia just kind of making dinner and then sitting down for whatever the Star Wars equivalent of Netflix is for an evening. It's just. After you've blown up orbital weapon systems and defeated empires, kind of regular married life probably just doesn't really do it for you anymore.
Well, that's why their domestic situation ended up producing a massively evil Sith Lord, or at least a massively emo Sith Lord. But yeah, no, it was a good film. It was, I enjoyed the satirical undertones, the weird below the normal, and yeah, as you say, Dennis Hopper was great. So yeah, no, it was good. I enjoyed it. I know you said I might recognise Carl McLachlan from Twin Peaks. I have not seen Twin Peaks. Maybe I should.
I think you should definitely catch up with Twin Peaks. The first series is only about sort of 8 or so episodes. It's quite short, and they did a much longer second series. The first series of Twin Peaks is much more accessible than the second series. The third series of Twin Peaks comes out next year. I'd like to cover it on the podcast, so I might use some of these recommendation slots to catch you up on Twin Peaks ahead of the 2017 Series 3.
It sounds like it'll take up quite a lot of them, so yeah, I'll just try and get around to watching it.
Yeah. And it's a good show. But the other thing I want to say about Blue Velvet is that David Lynch is a very strange director, and there are some very strange bits in Blue Velvet. There's all the various bits when they kind of they meet the friend of Frank's when they go to his party, and it's just very surreal, and the guy sort of singing.
Oh, that was great.
Old crooner songs. Yeah, it's terrifying, isn't it? But it's very strange.
Yeah, and obviously the bit at the end where he goes to the flat and finds the two of them. Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
That was when I knew something really odd was happening. The bit with Frank and the smartly dressed man, that was...
Yeah, it works well. It's a good twist also when the smartly dressed man comes back into it. And there's the yellow man as well, isn't there?
Yeah, I got the yellow man, yeah. I saw him when he was in the police station later. But yeah, the smartly dressed man, I kept waiting for him to come back.
Yeah.
At this point, the whole film had gone a bit odd, so I was willing to go with it at that stage, once I'd realised what was going on. But that did take a few minutes.
It is a strange film, and David Lynch is obviously known as being quite surreal in creating these very strange films. But I'd say that Blue Velvet is one of his more accessible films. It's a good one, and it's probably my favourite of his films because it is at its core quite conventional sort of mystery thriller plot, but it does unusual, interesting things with it. It's got these elements of irony, these kind of deeper thematic explorations. It's got very intense performances and quite intense violence. It's got and just moments of pure sort of Lynchian strangeness. His other films are very, very strange and quite confusing. In a future episode, I might recommend you something like Lost Highway that is much more of a headfuck than Blue Velvet.
Yeah, I did like the accessibility of it. Although because I knew it was meant to go weird, because I had some idea of David Lynch's reputation, I was a bit sort of through the first half hour, 45 minutes. I was sort of, this is quite, with the exception of some slightly odd direction in the first 5-10 minutes, this is quite slow and conventional, and then it suddenly goes really weird.
Yeah, it takes a while to build up. I guess it was made in the mid to late 80s, and films were slower paced back then. But I do like the fact that it kind of, the mystery sort of as they investigate it builds and builds and builds, and it kind of gets stranger, and then Frank turns up and it kind of goes ballistic.
Yes, I was perhaps vaguely starting to shift in my seat waiting for the drama to start, and then Frank turned up.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'm really glad you liked it.
Yep, no, good film. Cheers. Okay, is it my turn now?
So, Nick, what are you recommending to me for next episode?
As I know we're both fans of Aaron Sorkin, I thought I would recommend you the bit of Aaron Sorkin work that I think I've mentioned to you before, but I don't think you've ever actually watched. This is, of course, his pre-West Wing effort. It's Sports Night, everybody.
No, I haven't seen it, actually. And I do love Aaron Sorkin's. West Wing, still probably my favourite show, or one of my favourite shows, certainly. And I have really enjoyed his films like, Social Network, Steve Jobs, Few Good Men. But I've never seen Sports Night.
Sports Night it's a bit like a pre-evolved version of West Wing. I can't, in good conscience, pretend it's better than the West Wing or anything, even though, as a fanboy nerd, it would be totally in character to go, oh yeah, the earlier, more obscure work where he hadn't fully developed his style, yeah, that's the really good one. But no, it's not as good as West Wing. It is really good. I find it really uplifting and nice, actually. There's a few episodes, obviously, with massive sadness, and there is the slight clunk of the first few episodes because it was being sold as a sitcom to the TV networks, and Aaron Sorkin hadn't quite developed enough clout to just get people to do whatever the hell he wanted. It does have a laugh track, which, I'll be honest, is a bit weird, but they do turn it down quite quickly over the first few episodes after realising that it's ridiculous. Anyway, yeah, there were about 20-minute sitcom episodes, so yeah, I don't know if you could get through 6 to 8 of them or something. That's about 2 hours worth.
I'm sure that'll be doable. So yeah, no, definitely. I've been excited to watch some Sports Night, so this should be good. And I'm sure once I start watching it, I'll get into it, and you'll kind of be breezing through them in no time.
It is very bingeable, I find. It's quite nice to just sort of cruise along with it.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about The West Wing, how it ends, each episode ends with a kind of a positive, kind of, warm feeling. It makes you feel good about the show, it makes you want to watch more of it.
Yeah, it's like that, and you only have to wait 20 minutes for the warm feeling, rather than a whole 45. So yeah, and plus, it being an Aaron Sorkin show, you can enjoy the cameos by actors who will later be in The West Wing. That's
good. And also, I do love the regular selection of people he works with. He always has some great talent. So yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of some of my favourite actors in a show written by the person who could be my favourite screenwriter, certainly my favourite TV writer. That's about all we have time for this week. I keep writing week when I do my scripts, and obviously it's not week either.
That's the Modern Fantasy Violence drinking game. How many times will they say week when they actually mean fortnight?
Yeah. Okay, that's about all we have time for. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please write us a review on iTunes. We'd really appreciate it. And it helps us rise up the rankings, and then more people can find out about us. You can also find all of our previous episodes and our bonus episodes on our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com. You can follow us on Twitter at MFV Podcast. I've been Alastair Ball. You can follow me on Twitter at Alastair JR Ball. You can find my writing about science fiction on nimberspace.co.uk and my writing about politics on redtrainblog.blogspot.com.
Yep, and you can follow me on Twitter as @NickMB, and you can find my website at nickbryan.com, where I blog mostly about the fact there's a new episode of this podcast up, to be honest, and there's also details about my self-published crime books, the fourth of which is slowly making its way towards the outside world. Okay, and we'll be back in, well, if you're listening to these as they come, in slightly less than 2 weeks, thanks to our Civil War schedule shift, with episode 7, in which we will hopefully be catching up with the rest of season 2 of Daredevil, and Sports Night, and some other things. So yep, see you in not quite 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye. You can also follow us on Twitter. We tweet fairly regularly. Actually, that's a shit thing to say. Tweet fairly regularly. That's not like
yeah, that's definitely Lynch.
Yeah, we're great on Twitter. All right, okay. You can possibly use that for the end. We're great.
Whatever our social media strategy is, yeah, we do that.